Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you could please be seated, state and spell your name for the record.
Sharon Polakowski, SharonPolakowski.
Good afternoon. How are you employed?
I'm employed as a forensic scientist in the DNA analysis unit of the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory in Milwaukee.
How long have you worked in that capacity?
I've been at the crime laboratory since October of 1993. I've been doing DNA analysis since maybe 1997.
Can you just discuss the background training and education that you have, and then, since you've been there since '93, the continued education and training in the field of DNA analysis that has gotten you to where you are today?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in recombinant genetics with a minor in chemistry that I received in 1992. Since I was working at the laboratory, I received training there in what is known as serology, which is body fluid identification, and characterizing stains with methods other than DNA. I've also received training in 2 different types of DNA analysis at the laboratory and have continuing education every year.
How many trained DNA analysts are there at the crime lab?
Around 20 or so.
And are you dispersed in multiple labs throughout the state, or just in the Milwaukee lab?
Oh, well, there's a laboratory also in Madison that has another set of analysts.
What is DNA?
DNA has been called sort of a biological blueprint, and that's really what it is. It contains all of the instructions that make a plant, an animal, and each of us who we are. It's found in all of your cells except for red blood cells. You get half of your DNA from each of your biological parents. It's the same throughout your body and throughout your lifetime.
Do any 2 people have the exact identical DNA?
Identical siblings, for our purposes of testing, will have the same DNA, so we can't tell them apart. We would expect that unrelated people would have different DNA profiles.
Other than identity, okay, I think you just answered my next question. So other than identical siblings, unrelated people would have different profiles?
That's what I would expect, yes.
And how is it that you can go about identifying someone's DNA profile?
We use a method of testing known as short tandem repeat DNA testing.
And what is that?
Short tandem repeats are different areas of DNA that have pieces of DNA that repeat different numbers of times in different individuals. Since you get half of your DNA from each of your biological parents, you can think of it like beads on a string, 1 string from each parent. At one location, one of your parents may have given you 5 beads and your other parent gave you 7. So at that location, your type would be a 5-7. Other people may have the same type at that location, but as we look at the different locations, there's differences between individuals. And we currently look at 23 different locations.
How is it that you can go about identifying a specific person's DNA? Are you given something?
We are given standards from individuals to compare to samples from evidentiary samples.
So you would be provided a known standard from a known person, and then you can use that to compare to other items of evidence?
Yes.
And how is it typically that you receive the standards, the known standards?
Standards are typically a buccal swab from inside the mouth, or they might be a dried blood standard. Typically that comes from someone who's no longer living.
How is it that your lab receives the items that you're going to compare the standards to?
They are submitted to us by various law enforcement agencies.
And sometimes you're getting swabs from pieces of evidence, right?
Yes.
And sometimes you're getting the items themselves?
Sometimes, yes.
And is there some kind of a screening process done when you receive either swabs or a physical piece of evidence?
Yes.
Can you describe what that process is like?
It depends on what the items are and what we're looking for on the items. So a typical screening process is to look at a particular item for either a body fluid or other areas where DNA may be present. If it's a swab from an item, we may cut part of the swab or maybe the entire thing, depending on if there's a body fluid present or not. If it's an item, we might be looking for body fluid stains or areas where DNA may be deposited.
And how is it that a person can leave their DNA on something?
It can be left in a variety of ways.
And what kind of, are there different items from the body that it can be left on? Or from, I should say?
Yes, it can be left via body fluid stains like saliva or blood or semen. It can also be left through someone wearing an item or touching it or handling it.
Is that commonly referred to like touch DNA?
Yes.
And what does touch DNA come from? What does it come from?
Typically, we would expect it to come from shed skin cells from some part of your body, your skin.
That's why you gave the example of an article of clothing, right?
Right.
All right. Can DNA be fragile in a sense? In other words, can it be removed from items once it's on an item?
Yes, it can be.
And what are some things that could affect whether or not it is left on an item or not?
Well, one of the things that can affect it is how much is there to start with, how long it's been on an item, if it's subject to some sort of environmental conditions such as sunlight or rain, if it is rubbed off or cleaned off, or if it just is there for a long period of time, DNA does start to break down.
How about fire?
Yes, that would heat will destroy DNA.
And how about passage of time, just general passage of time?
Yes.
How so?
Just in general, it starts to break down, and it depends, the rate of breakdown depends on what was there to start, why it's breaking down, if it's just time or if there's temperature involved or something like that.
If you, actually before I go there, how about if something is washed with water?
If it's washed with water, it can wash DNA away, yes.
And just because you touch an item, do you always leave DNA?
I'm not sure if you would or not, but it may not be in an amount that we would be able to detect.
All right, so when you receive items of evidence to analyze and you're able to see that there is DNA on that item, does that necessarily mean that you're going to be able to identify whose DNA that is?
No, not necessarily.
You may not have the appropriate comparison standard, right?
That's correct.
And another reason might be just because there's not enough DNA left?
There might not be enough, or in terms of identifying it, we don't always identify a particular person. We do comparisons and decide if it's consistent or if they could be included in a mixture or not. So it might not be as definitive as what you're asking.
So in other words, you use a comparison method when there's mixtures, right?
Yes.
And you even though the DNA is there, you may or may not be able to say if someone's profile is consistent with being in that mixture.
That's correct.
What are some of the things that could affect your ability to do that?
How complex the mixture is, in other words, how many people's DNA is there, if it's a low-level mixture or partial because it's low level. If the person is a very low-level contributor, would be a lot of uncertainty, and we may not be able to make any kind of conclusion.
Okay. Did you prepare numerous reports related to this case?
I did.
And I guess that goes without saying you received a good number of items related to this case for DNA analysis, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to show you exhibits 436, 439, 440, and 441.
Numbers one more time.
Sure. 436, 439, 440, 441. And just take a moment and parse through those and then tell me when you're done.
All right.
Are all of those copies of reports you prepared for this case?
Yes, they are.
I'd move 436, 439, 440, and 441 into evidence.
Any objection?
No.
They received.
And you know that because your signature's on them, right? Or a copy of your signature?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to start with Exhibit 436 in front of you, and I guess I would also have 439 in front of you. At the outset, when you were first involved with this case, it was early April of 2021, correct?
Yes.
And you received items related to the recovery of at the time, unidentified human leg that had been found at Warnemont Park, right?
Yes, it was actually 2024.
I'm sorry, 2024. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, yes.
Were you then provided with known standards or items that you were going to try to identify known standards so that you could compare to the swab from the leg found at Warnemont Park?
Yes,
Was one of those items a toothbrush
it was.
from Sade Robinson's apartment?
Yes.
Okay. And then you also received a buccal swab standard from Sade's mother, Sheena Scarborough, correct?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury regarding the toothbrush and the buccal swab standard from Sheena Scarborough, were you able to, what did you do with those items?
I swabbed the different areas of the toothbrush to get a DNA profile from it. I obtained that and then compared that to the standard from Sheena Scarborough to see if, in fact, they shared DNA at each of the locations.
What did you find? That
they did, and that the person on the toothbrush could be a biological child of Sheena Scarborough.
All right. And then did you, so going forward, did you use that toothbrush DNA profile as sort of the known standard for Sade Robinson?
Yes, based on that, I said I would use that as her standard.
And did you compare the known standard for Sade Robinson to the sample from the leg from Warnemont Park?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury how you did that analysis and what conclusion you came through on that?
So basically a profile was developed from the leg and compared to the toothbrush I was using as the standard from Sade Robinson.
What was your finding?
That the two profiles were consistent and that the probability of randomly selecting an unrelated person with that profile from the population is not more frequent than 1 in 1 quadrillion.
So does that strongly suggest the leg is Sade's leg?
Yes.
Okay. And then you got known standards from a number of other body parts. So it's not known standards. You got swabs from a number of other body parts that were recovered after that first date you became involved in April, right?
Yes, some were swabs and some were bloodstain cards.
And which of those did you analyze to see if it was Sade?
I looked at a bloodstain sample from a foot/flesh, swabs from flesh, swabs from muscle of left foot and flesh, and bone marrow swabs, as well as swabs from calf and flesh and from proximal bone surface.
Did you come to the same conclusion about all of those?
I did.
And what was that conclusion?
That they are consistent with the standard from Sade Robinson, and that the probability of randomly selecting an unrelated person with the same profile is not more frequent than 1 in 1 quadrillion.
Later on, you received a standard from an arm that had been recovered in Waukegan, Illinois, and similarly compared to Sade Robinson's, correct?
Yes.
And what conclusion did you come to that swab?
I came to the same result, that it was consistent with her. I'm not sure.
I think it's 439.
Thank you.
You put that in a different DNA report, right?
Yes, that was later. And the statistic is the same.
Okay. Part of the reason that shows up in a different report is because it was recovered so far later in time, right?
Yes, I had already issued the other report.
Okay. I think that does it for 436 and 439. Did I miss anything in those?
I don't believe so.
Okay. You received swabs that were obtained from parts of a vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Did you compare those? And you also received a swab, a known standard for Maxwell Anderson.
Yes, I did.
Did you compare the swabs from the vehicle to the swabs from Sade Robinson, or the standards of Sade Robinson and Maxwell Anderson?
I only had results from one swab from the vehicle, from the exterior driver door handle, but I did compare it to both of them.
But you got a number of swabs, correct?
Yes, we received 5 swabs, and I tested 3 of them.
Why was that?
Those were the 3 that was originally asked to test, from the exterior driver door handle, the exterior driver rear door handle, and the exterior trunk latch.
And of those 3 swabs that you were asked to analyze, were they all even suitable for further DNA analysis?
No, only the swabs from the exterior driver door handle were.
Can you tell the jury why some aren't suitable, and what you used to make that determination?
Sure. They did not have enough DNA to go through our process. Once the DNA was extracted, and I saw how much there was. So the only one that continued was the driver door handles swabs.
The driver door handle, you identified what?
It was a partial single source female profile that was consistent with the profile from Sade Robinson.
I want to move on to Exhibit 440. You received a number of items, swabs from Maxwell Anderson's home, correct?
Yes.
And on any of those swabs, were you able to find support for inclusion of Sade Robinson?
Of those items that were submitted, there was only one, the plaid jacket from the living room, that could be associated with Sade Robinson.
Showing you Exhibit 467. I'm not going to open it because I don't want to destroy this bag. I think you can kind of... need to use a mic. All right, you can see this bag. Is there a crime lab sticker on the bag?
There is.
I'm going to turn a little bit, point it out to the jury where it is.
The yellow barcode label has our case number, R24-952, and our item designation of F.
And that's how you know the item is the actual thing you examined?
I actually did not examine this item, as someone else did the screening on it.
Screening, why don't you discuss that?
So a different analyst looked at this item and took swabbings from 3 different areas to attempt to develop DNA profiles from those.
And you analyzed those swabs?
Yes.
Okay. Before we get into that, there were other swabs from like sheets, a duvet cover, pillowcase, walls, that sort of thing, right? From the house?
Yes.
Those are what you were not able to find inclusion for Sade Robinson, correct?
Right. Of the ones that were examined and gave us results that were able to be compared, none of those have any inclusionary. She can't be included on any of them.
Okay. Let's talk about the plaid jacket that's in front of you there. I think there's an exhibit sticker. Can you tell us what the exhibit number is? I think it's right there.
467.
And that would be crime lab item what?
Be our item F.
F, and that's what's on that yellow sticker?
Yes.
How many swabs from the plaid jacket did you do DNA analysis and comparison on?
There were 3 separate areas that were swabbed: the exterior right sleeve, the interior of the front pockets, and the exterior left sleeve.
Start with the exterior from the right sleeve. What did you do? How did you do the analysis? And then what did you find?
Well, I did the analysis the way we would do any other DNA analysis, through the same steps to get the data. I found that it is a 4-person mixture with at least 1 male. And I assumed the presence of Maxwell Anderson on that since it came from his home.
And so then you do a comparison?
Yes, then a comparison, an interpretation and comparison then to the standard from Sade Robinson.
And when you compared that four-person mixture to the known standard for Sade Robinson, did you find any support for inclusion of her DNA?
I did.
Tell us what you found.
So this statistic is what is known as a likelihood ratio, and that compares two different explanations for a given profile. One in which a particular person is included as a contributor, and one in which they are not. So for this item, the two different explanations are this DNA profile is from a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson, Sade Robinson, and two unknown individuals, or it comes from a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson and three unknown individuals. In this case, it is at least 177,000 times more likely to see this profile if it is a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson, Sade Robinson, and two unknown people than from Maxwell Anderson and three unknown.
And is that how you were able to conclude that there's very strong support for inclusion of Sade Robinson in that four-person mixture?
It is actually strong support.
Okay, strong support for inclusion. Thank you.
Yes.
And again, your hypothesis that you're using there, the four people, it's because you were able to identify a four-person mixture.
Yes, and looking at the data, it appears to be a four-person mixture.
Let's go to the next swab from the interior front pockets of the jacket. What did you find there?
That is a three-person mixture. And similarly to the other one, the two different explanations for this profile would be that is a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson and an unknown person, or from Maxwell Anderson and two unknown individuals.
What did you find?
In this case, it is at least a quadrillion times more likely to see this profile if it's a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson, Sade Robinson, and one unknown than if it's a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson and two unknowns.
And that one is very strong support for inclusion of Sade Robinson in the mixture?
It is.
Lastly, the sleeve of the plaid jacket, the left sleeve of the plaid jacket.
Yes, this is a three-person mixture of DNA.
And what did you find?
That when compared with Sade Robinson, the likelihood ratio fell into our uninformative range, so that I can't make any conclusions regarding the presence or absence of her DNA in that mixture.
Can't say whether her DNA is in there or whether it's not in there.
Yeah, right. There's not enough statistical support either way.
All right. So of those three, we have in some strong support for inclusion on the swab from the exterior right sleeve, very strong support for inclusion on the swab from the interior of the front pockets, and for the last one, just uninformative.
Yes.
All right. Handing you exhibit 455. Are you able to tell whether that was an item that was screened by the crime lab?
Yes, it is.
And what is that item?
This is an item containing 3 gloves and I believe a rock that had blood on them. It is crime lab item AT, and then sub-designated into AT1, AT2, AT3, and AT4.
Specifically latex gloves, right?
I believe so. Again, I did not look at these, but I read the notes of the person who did.
All right. And those were screened, and then you analyzed the screens.
Yes.
And so if you want to flip to page, I think it's page 10 of exhibit 440. Just let me know when you're there.
It's page 15.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You are right. All right, so you analyzed first swabs from blood stains on the first latex glove and swabs from blood stains on the third latex glove, correct?
Yes.
There were 3 total, right, according to
Yes.
your report?
Yes.
Okay. And what were you able to learn when you analyzed the swabs from blood stains from the first latex glove and third latex glove?
Those had the same single source female profile.
As each other,
As
right?
each other, yes. They appeared to be the same, and Sade Robinson and Maxwell Anderson are both excluded as the source of that DNA.
The blood is not Sade's and it's not Mr. Anderson's.
Their DNA is not on there, no.
How about the next one, the blood stain on the second latex glove? What did you learn there?
There was a different female profile on there, and again, Sade Robinson and Maxwell Anderson are both excluded.
Next, the swabs from the exterior of the first latex glove. So that was, we already mentioned the first, where there's a female profile that's not Sade or Maxwell Anderson. Now there was a swab from the exterior of that glove?
Yes.
And what was your conclusion there?
That is a 3-person mixture.
What were your results when comparing to Maxwell Anderson?
That is at least 1,000,000 times more likely to observe that DNA profile if it is a mixture from 3 unknown individual people than if it is a mixture from Maxwell Anderson and 2 unknown individuals.
So what does that say about exclusion?
It's very strong support for exclusion of Maxwell Anderson.
And how about Sade?
Her likelihood ratio fell into the uninformative range, and so I can't make any determinations.
From that swab alone, right?
From that one, yes.
But you do know from the blood that she's excluded on the blood from
She
that.
yes, she was excluded from those other profiles.
And uninformative means what?
It means the statistical values that fall in that range cannot be used to make any conclusions regarding the presence or absence of someone's DNA.
Let's move on to the next one, the swabs from the interior of the first latex glove. So we're still on that first one.
Yes.
What did you learn about the interior of that glove?
It is a 2-person mixture, and both Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson are excluded from that mixture.
Swabs from this exterior of the second latex glove.
It is also a 2-person mixture, and Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson are also excluded from that as well.
Swabs from the interior of the second latex glove.
A 2-person mixture, and Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson are both excluded.
Third latex glove exterior swabs.
That is a 3-person mixture. When compared with Maxwell Anderson, he is excluded from that. As for Sade Robinson, it's at least 490 trillion times more likely to observe that profile if it's a mixture of DNA from 3 unknown people than if it is a mixture resulting from Sade Robinson and 2 unknowns. So it is very strong support for exclusion.
Okay, exclusion, very strong support for exclusion. Let's go swabs from the interior of the third glove.
That is also a 3-person mixture, and both Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson are excluded from it.
Were you in any way able to find inclusion for Sade Robinson or Maxwell Anderson on any of the latex gloves?
No.
I'm going to move on to item BF. This has already been admitted as Exhibit 480. Recognize the sticker of item BF being from this case?
I do.
All right, and that's that yellow sticker with the crime lab case number on it?
Yes.
All right. And what is this item?
It is a sweatshirt / jacket.
The large gray sweatshirt?
Yes.
Okay. What did you, what was this screened for?
It was screened for blood and also for other areas of DNA.
How many screened either swabs or cuttings did you analyze from this jacket?
In total, 19.
All right, let's start with the cutting from the stain on the bottom of the front waistband. Do you see that one?
Is that item BF2?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What'd you find?
It was a low-level partial mixture profile, and I determined that it was not suitable for comparison.
So there was DNA there, it just was, you couldn't do anything further with it?
That's correct.
How about the swabs from the zipper pull from that jacket?
That is a single-source female profile that is consistent with the standard from Sade Robinson. And the probability of randomly selecting that profile from a population of unrelated people is not more frequent than 1 in 1 quadrillion.
Single source female profile, so this one you're not doing the hypothetical analysis?
That's correct. This is a different type of calculation.
And it's consistent with Sade?
It is.
Let's move on to BF9, the cutting from the stain on the inside left bottom of that sweatshirt or jacket.
That is a 2-person mixture.
What did you find?
When compared with Maxwell Anderson, it's at least a quadrillion times to see that DNA profile if it's a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson and an unknown person than from 2 unknown individuals.
How about Sade?
It is at least 121 million times more likely to observe that profile if it's a mixture resulting from 2 unknown individuals than from Sade Robinson and an unknown person.
So where would those two fall on the inclusion-exclusion scale, if you will?
Maxwell Anderson falls in the very strong support for inclusion. Sade Robinson falls in very strong support for exclusion.
Move on to BF10, the cutting from stain on the left side chest pocket.
That is a 2-person mixture also.
What is the result?
Compared with Maxwell Anderson, it's at least a quadrillion times more likely to observe that DNA profile if it's a mixture of Maxwell Anderson and an unknown person than from 2 unknown individuals.
And Sade?
Her statistic falls into the uninformative range again.
And what range does Mr. Anderson's fall into?
Very strong support for inclusion.
Inclusion, okay. Cutting from the inside left cuff of that jacket or sweatshirt.
Also a 2-person mixture.
What'd you find?
When compared with Maxwell Anderson, it's at least a quadrillion times more likely to observe that profile if it's a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson and an unknown person than from 2 unknown individuals.
Where does that fall?
Very strong support for inclusion.
How about Sade?
She's excluded.
Cutting from, actually, I'm going to move on to the bottom of page 19. There are cuttings from numerous locations that revealed a single source male profile, correct?
Yes, or partial profiles.
Partial, I'm sorry. And what are those locations?
Those are the right side chest pocket, the inside right bottom, the inside back waistband, the inside right cuff, the inside back neck.
And whose profile were those consistent with?
They were consistent with Maxwell Anderson.
Next page, BF12, the cutting from a stain on the outer right arm.
Was a low-level partial profile not suitable for comparison.
So again, DNA there, you just couldn't do anything more with it.
Right.
Okay. And then the cutting from the stain on the right arm.
That is also a partial single-source male profile that is consistent with the profile from Maxwell Anderson.
And lastly, the cutting from the stain on the left inside hood of the sweatshirt and jacket.
That is a 2-person mixture with at least 1 male.
With at least 1 male?
Yes.
And did you compare that 2-person mixture to Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson?
I did.
What did you find?
For the comparison with Maxwell Anderson, it is at least a quadrillion times more likely to see that profile if it's a mixture of DNA from Maxwell Anderson and an unknown person than from 2 unknown individuals.
And where does that fall in the inclusion range for both of them?
Well, that was for Maxwell Anderson, and that's
Oh,
very
I'm
strong support for inclusion.
And how about Sade's?
Is at least a quadrillion times more likely to observe that DNA profile if it's a mixture of DNA from Sade Robinson and an unknown person than from 2 unknown individuals.
And where do both of those fall for Maxwell Anderson and for Sade Robinson on?
Each of them are very strong support for inclusion.
All right, I'm going to hold up exhibit 480 again. The zipper pull, what was that one?
That was
Big time.
BF8 and was a single source female profile.
Whose?
It was consistent with Sade Robinson.
And inside the left side of the hood,
It was a mixture profile.
and the result being
That each, Maxwell Anderson was very strong support for inclusion, and Sade Robinson was very strong support for inclusion.
nothing else.
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello.
So it sounds like you played a pretty pivotal role in this investigation because you did, sounds like you tested a variety of items, correct?
Yes.
And do you remember how many reports in total that you drafted? Or, I mean, I guess that you did?
I believe I have 5.
5 in total.
Yes.
And so I just want to, just to kind of, I just get some more background here. Sometimes items are actually coming to the lab, like a sweatshirt, and you're actually visually scanning and analyzing them, right?
Yes.
And I think you said that because you've done training and you kind of have an expertise in detecting bodily fluids from humans, right?
Yes, that's part of what I do.
And so you're able to tell the difference between like you can recognize if you see blood on a surface, right?
We have tests that detect blood, yes.
And are you able to detect it just on using your naked eye as well, right?
Well, we look for stains that appear that they could be blood, and then we have further tests that we can do.
I mean, obviously, if it's like red or like a dark brown, maybe you could think that it could possibly be blood.
Yes.
But you still do further testing because you need it to be precise.
Yes, we want to identify it if it's possible to do so.
And are you able to also identify whether it's sweat, urine, or saliva or other different fluids?
We have a presumptive test for saliva, which means it indicates that a body fluid could be saliva but doesn't identify it. The other two, sweat and urine, we don't have tests for those.
Okay, but are you able to determine that using your naked eye, or do you actually have to perform tests to determine which type of DNA it is?
We would have to, for saliva, we have a test that we can run to see if that's what it could be.
Okay, and so I think we've covered this, but there's all sorts of different types of DNA, correct?
I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Well, so there's different sources of DNA, correct?
Yes.
Like, for example, blood, saliva, semen, and even skin cells, right?
Yes.
And when you use kind of your analysis to be able to determine, ideally whether someone's had contact with a specific surface, right?
Actually, no, that's not part of what my testing tells me. I can't tell you how DNA got onto an item.
But you're able to see whether someone's DNA is on an item, correct?
I can see whether or not they're consistent with it or can be possibly included. We don't identify.
Yeah, but you don't know how the DNA got there, right?
That's correct.
And you don't know when it got there, right?
That's correct.
And when you're doing your analysis, we heard you say the words like inclusion and exclusion, right?
Yes.
And when you're writing a report, there's different types of verbal qualifiers that you can use, right?
For the likelihood ratio for the mixtures, yes.
So, for instance, you can say someone is very strong support for inclusion, right?
Yes, that's a qualifier we would use.
Or strong, and then below that is strong support, right?
Yes.
And moderate support for inclusion.
Yes, it depends on what the likelihood ratio actually the value is.
And so the higher the likelihood ratio, the stronger support?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's, you said uninformative, right?
Yes.
And that means that you can't say it's included and you also can't say it's excluded, right?
It really has more to do with that the likelihood ratio is so low, it doesn't support either statement. And it was determined when we were doing validation of the software that we use There were some handful of profiles that we knew with likelihood ratios that were around 300 maybe, where we knew that person wasn't actually included and should not have been included. So we developed an informative range to avoid including or excluding somebody improperly.
Okay. And then you can also have moderate support for exclusion, right?
Yes.
And also strong support for exclusion and very strong support for exclusion.
Yes.
And I suppose we already covered that, I'm sorry. And the DNA process is important, I guess, in criminal courts, right?
Yes, it has been for quite a long time.
Because it can suggest potentially that someone's been at a certain location if their DNA's been there.
Again, my testing doesn't tell me that, but it is used in criminal cases.
But DNA can be used to exclude suspects, right?
It can be used to exclude anybody, really. We compare different people.
And I think you talked a little bit about there's kind of different, I don't know what's the right word for it, but you said there's touch DNA, right?
Yes, touch DNA is kind of a term used when there's no body fluid associated with DNA and it's on an item that you would expect someone to touch or handle, like a pen or a gun or something like that.
And that's kind of an example of me like touching something directly, like a pen, right?
Yes.
But also I could be, if I'm sweating, I can be leaving traces of my DNA through my sweat as well.
It would facilitate transfer of the cells, yes.
And there's also something called indirect transfer of DNA, right?
I think I know what you're referring to, yes.
And what am I referring to?
You're probably referring to secondary transfer.
And can you explain what like secondary transfer is?
Secondary transfer is when DNA gets on an item, not from the person it comes from. So if I were up here and got, say, some blood on my chair, and then the next person came up and sat on it and got my blood on their clothing, even though they've never had any contact with me, that would be secondary transfer. It's getting onto an object with an intervening object, I guess.
So for instance, if there's a doorknob and people are commonly using this doorknob, and then I use the doorknob, and then I go home and I'm using my kitchen knives. It's possible, right, that someone who has left their DNA in that doorknob could be found on the knife, right?
It would be possible. It would depend on how much of that DNA was on the doorknob, how much transferred to your hand, and how much was left by the time you touched your knife.
Okay, so if I have someone who sits on my couch, and then they leave and I throw my jacket on the couch, it's possible that their DNA could be found on the jacket.
Again, it would depend on, were they sitting on it with shorts on or did they have pants on, how much DNA got on it from that person, and then how much would have gotten onto your jacket. So transfer of touch DNA or transfer of DNA can happen in a lot of different ways, and it's hard to quantify whether or not it would happen.
But it's possible, right?
It is possible.
And secondary transfer, I think as you referred to it, isn't some crazy phenomenon. It's well known and well accepted in forensic science, correct?
It is certainly something that's been the subject of numerous papers.
And at the crime lab, you have the technology to find even small amounts of DNA on an item, correct?
Yes.
So even trace amounts of biological material can provide a DNA profile, right?
Yes.
And that could potentially, it might not be your job, but it could potentially be used by law enforcement or the district's attorney's office to link a suspect to a crime scene.
It allows us to provide information to our submitting agencies.
And so I want to go to one of the exhibits. I got to just figure out which one it is. I believe it's your report number 15. It's the analysis of the door handle of the vehicle, right?
Yes.
And what exhibit number is that?
That is from Report Exhibit 441, dated November 20th, 2024.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So in this report, and I'm going to actually... Can I actually take that?
Sure.
I'm just going to put it up here. Permission to publish, Judge? We already moved it in.
Any objection?
No.
Go ahead.
All right, so, well, it's gonna be kind of hard to see here, but you have items, it has items CA, CB, CC, CD, CE, you see that?
Yes.
And then you give it a sub-designation, right? CA1, CB1, CC1, correct?
Yes.
And so when we look at the actual analysis, it's labeled as, like, so CA, item CA is listed as CA1 when you're actually doing the analysis, right?
Yes, it's a cutting taken from CA, and for tracking purposes through our laboratory system, once something is separated from its parent item, it gets its own designation, so we can see where it goes in the laboratory and who has contact with it.
Yeah, so if the jury wants to look and understand what sample is connected with which, I guess, conclusion or probability conclusion, they can look at the sample CA and then look at sample CA1 and see what the ultimate conclusion is, right?
Yes.
And on this, so CA1 was the driver's side door handle, correct?
Swabs from the exterior driver door handle, yes.
Okay, and that was, do you know what type of vehicle it was?
Not off the top of my head, no.
And you were able to determine that there was human DNA, correct?
Yes.
And that there was male DNA, correct?
There was a small amount of male DNA. So what present limited means is that the amount of male DNA there is low, and it's below what we would expect to see a profile from.
Okay. And you ultimately concluded that there was male DNA on there, but it wasn't Maxwell Anderson, correct? You said he's excluded.
Well, the profile that is on there that came up is a partial single source female profile. So given that the male DNA just doesn't really show up in this profile at all. Okay. So he is excluded from the female profile, yes.
Okay. But you did find Sade Robinson's DNA on there.
I found a profile consistent with her.
Okay. And so there was DNA that you were able to gather from that door handle, and we know Sade's DNA. You conclude that there's a probability that her DNA is on there.
I conclude that it's consistent with her. Yes, it could be her.
And you made, and your exact words in here were Maxwell S. Anderson is excluded. Those were your words, right?
Yes, he is excluded from that female profile.
Okay. So you can't conclude that his DNA was ever found on the door handle that vehicle.
I cannot.
Neither on the trunk latch either.
There wasn't, I don't remember, the trunk latch didn't go past our quantitation step, which is to see how much DNA is present. There wasn't enough.
Okay. I'm going to just give you back 441.
Thank you.
All right, I want to move on to Exhibit 440. You have that in front of you still?
Yes, I do.
And that is a variety of items that you tested that were found in Max Anderson's home, correct?
Yes, there are some items in here from his home, and there are others as well.
Okay, yes. And you tested a lot of different items, correct?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how many there are in total, probably like 50. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, there's quite.
I don't actually.
I mean, if you could just take a minute and count how many items you tested.
From his home or all together on this list?
You can do it all together on that list.
Oh, certainly.
There's a total of 33 items on the list that were tested, and some of them had sub-designated items within them, such as the latex gloves.
What was the
Okay.
number? I'm sorry.
Did I say 36?
I don't know. I didn't hear.
I don't remember.
What was the question? I didn't even hear it.
I didn't hear her answer as to what the number was.
What's the number? It was 33. Oh, thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And some, like I said, some of them had more than one item in them, and so those have sub-designated items as well.
Okay, so we have exhibit 440 on the screen, okay? So it just might be a little easier to see rather than me using that contraption over there. Can everyone in the jury see this screen? No? All right, you can see the screen, you can't read it. Yeah, maybe that might be helpful. Okay, and what I was talking about before is all.
Normally, it has to just go up to your table so that your client can see it as well.
And so what I was talking about earlier, just so they can see, the jury can see another format. All right, so swabs that were taken from the mid stairs to the west wall are going to have item D, right?
Yes.
And then the sub designation
Yes.
is where they can find it if you're just paging through the pack, right?
Right. It's what was ultimately subjected to DNA testing.
Attorney Finley, do you want to use a microphone?
Yeah, well, yeah. And I want and just scroll back so they can see something. And sometimes if you take multiple swabs from an item, there's going to be Q1, Q2, Q3, right?
Yes, there's a lot of items had multiple samples taken. Some were swabs, some were cuttings from those items, and those would have been processed separately.
Yeah, and then you sometimes can draw a conclusion for each different sample, whether someone's included, excluded, or what have you, right?
If they went through the entire process and were suitable for comparison, yes.
And I want to go to this screen. Yeah. So we can see these are all the items that this is just one page of all the items you tested. A majority of these look like they're from Max Anderson's home, correct?
Yes, a lot of them are. Not all of them, however.
So item D, mid-stairs of west wall, swabs, correct?
Yes.
Item E, swabs from upper stairs and east wall.
Yes.
Item F, that's that plaid jacket, correct? That I think that we pulled out and you got to see, right?
Yes.
And then we have swabs from the north wall of the foyer, right?
Yes.
Swabs from the pillow in the bed,
Just the pillow itself, and then samples were taken from that.
and then also the pillowcase.
Yes.
And the duvet cover, correct?
Yes.
Even the caulk line of the bathtub, right?
Yes.
And then the wall above the towel rack, correct?
Yes.
The bathtub faucet,
Yes.
knobs on the bathtub,
Yes.
fitted sheets from the bed,
Yes.
the wall below the handrail,
Yes.
more below the handrail, it looks like,
Yes.
and then the east wall, knives from the kitchen, right?
And one knife, yes.
It was just one knife. Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry. And then obviously the DNA sample from Mr. Anderson, right?
Yes.
And then you even did hair pluckings from the proximal bone, right?
Yes, these were other items that were submitted.
And there was a blonde hair found on one of those proximal bone, correct?
There were hairs on, those were both hairs, AS1 and AS2. I didn't examine them, another analyst did.
But you know the conclusion was that Max Anderson was excluded, correct?
I'm going to object for hearsay, move to strike.
Any response?
It's in her report.
State?
The report's admitted.
Yeah,
And
that's fine, but okay, fine.
Withdraw the objection?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Maxwell Anderson was excluded on both of those hairs.
okay. And Sade Robinson was included, right?
Yes, both of those are single source female profiles that are consistent with Sade Robinson.
Okay. And then latex gloves. You tested a variety of those, correct?
Yes.
There was a rock that it looked like they had blood on it, but you didn't examine that?
Right. Again, I had another analyst looked at that and she did not examine the rock, just the gloves.
Is there any reason why she didn't examine the rock?
Objection, speculation.
If you have to speculate, do you know the answer to that? Or do you have to speculate to answer that?
Probably.
All right, then I do object. And
Okay, then at this point, I will sustain the objection. Next question, please.
And then this blanket, BE. Do you remember the blanket?
Yes, again, I did not examine that, but it was submitted and examined by another analyst.
And you concluded the findings in your report, right?
Right, because I did the DNA analysis of the data and the comparisons.
Okay, and do you recall what that blanket looked like? Did you ever see it?
I saw a photo of it.
And what did it look like?
It had a picture of Sade Robinson on it.
Okay. And then the sweatshirt jacket, BF, we saw that, correct?
Yes.
That's that gray jacket, whatever you want on.
Yes.
Whatever, dark colored jacket. And then there's multiple hairs that are located in the sweatshirt jacket, right?
Yes.
And then BI is swabs from a knife handle, right?
Yes.
BJ swabs from a knife blade.
Yes.
And are these a pocket knife?
I don't know for sure because we got the swabs in.
Okay. But swabs from top of a lighter, side of a lighter, right?
Yes.
Side of a keychain light, right?
Yes.
And then multiple swabs, 3 different swabs from boxes of matches, right?
Yes.
And your lab gets the actual, with those, so those are just swabs. Someone else takes these swabs, sends them to the lab, right?
Yes, those came in as swabs from those items.
Okay, now I want to just move down to screening. So screening, and you said blood was identified on different items, right?
Yes.
Those latex gloves that I think you described as blood stains, right?
Yes.
Fitted sheets, pillowcase from bed, blood, right?
Yes.
Presumptive testing for blood was positive on these 3 items, right?
Yes, so blood was not confirmed as being there, but the presumptive test indicated it could be blood.
Okay, and now I want to focus on this blood was not detected on, okay? And now can you scroll down the page? So the bathtub area, I think we talked about that up there. There's no blood at all found on any of the swabs of the bathroom.
It was not detected on those swabs.
This plaid jacket that we held up, no blood on there.
No blood, the tests were negative.
Okay. And the knife handle and knife blade that was swabbed, there's no blood on it, right?
That's correct.
These 13 stains on this is the dark sweatshirt, correct?
Yes.
You took 13 different samples from that sweatshirt.
Well, 13 different stains were tested for the possible presence of blood.
And absolutely none of them had blood on them.
They were negative.
The blanket that you said had Sade's face on it, correct?
Yes.
No blood on that either.
No.
And you ran the test, there's no blood.
Another analyst ran the test, but yes, her results showed that they were negative.
Okay. And so I want to talk about the analysis that was done on those gloves. So you said that, I want to go back to the uninformative one. I think this is going to be page, sorry. It's going to be, I think it starts on page 15. It says swab some blood stain of first latex glove and third glove. Both Maxwell Anderson and Sade are excluded, right?
Item AT2A?
AT1A, AT1B, AT1C.
Yes, they're both excluded.
Okay, and sorry, you're right. I did say I wanted to talk about the uninformative one, and that's on page 16. So that's AT1D, right?
Yes.
So 3-person mixture, at least one of them is male, right?
Yes.
And you said Max Anderson is very strong support for exclusion, right?
Yes, he is.
5.60 times 10 to the negative 7th.
Yes, so it's at least 1 million times more likely to see that profile if he's not included as a contributor than if he is.
So 1 in a million, right?
Well, that's the likelihood ratio. It's not an odds. It's just that's what the ratio of the probabilities are between the two statements.
Okay. And then Sade Robinson, 3.22 times 10 to the negative 3rd.
Yes.
What's that statistical value?
I would have to do a calculation because it's the reciprocal.
Okay.
So
And
it's less than 1,000.
okay. So less than 1,000 versus less than 1 million.
Yes.
Okay. There's a big difference in those calculations, right?
Right. The uninformative range goes from 1 to 1,000 for inclusion and 1 to 1,000 towards exclusion. And that's where the cutoff is.
Okay. And so if we could just go to page 18. If we're looking on page 18, or actually look at page 19, BF 16.
Yes.
Cutting from inside left cuff of sweatshirt jacket, BF 16. That, again, is that dark colored sweatshirt, right?
Yes.
You analyzed that and you said Sade Robinson is excluded, correct?
She is.
Your words below that, the excluded, all caps, right?
Yes.
It says it is not possible for this observed DNA profile to result.
From Sade Robinson and an unknown person. Yes.
So 0% chance that she's a possible contributor.
There is the likelihood ratio is 0, so it is an exclusion.
Okay. Okay, and I want to go to page 20. It's just interesting. It says, please submit appropriate biological standards from any individuals thought to be involved for further DNA interpretations to be made. You see that?
Yes.
Did you receive any other biological standards from any other individuals other than Maxwell Anderson and Sade Robinson?
I did receive one from Sheena Scarborough, but it was not used for comparison for these items, simply with the toothbrush.
Did you receive any standards from any other males?
No.
Only Max Anderson, right?
Yes.
All right, so I want to go through some of these conclusions that you have in your report, okay?
All right.
And if we can start with well, let me just try to find the right one. So blood stains from this pillow, item P2. You see that? It's on page 6. I don't know if that's up.
Yes.
And and then it goes on to page 7. It says 2-person mixture, at least 1 male, right?
Yes.
And then on page 7, Maxwell Anderson is included, right?
Yes, he is very strong support for inclusion.
And Sade Robinson is excluded, right?
She is.
And then bloodstain from pillow, P3, right?
Yes.
Maxwell Anderson's uninformative. Sade Robinson is excluded, right?
Yes.
And then moving on, stains from pillowcase from bed. Sade Robinson excluded, right?
Are you talking about Q1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
Yes, she is excluded from all of those.
Okay, and then stains from sheets on bed. R1, R7, R8, and R10. Those? You see those?
Yes,
Sade Robinson is excluded, right?
she is.
Then stains from sheets on bed. R5, R6, R9. We
Yes.
see Maxwell Anderson.
Yes, it's partial single source male profiles that are consistent with him.
And Sade Robinson is what? Excluded?
She is excluded.
All right. And then stains from sheet on bed are 2.
She's excluded.
She's excluded as well, and we see 0% chance, right?
It's just the likelihood ratio is 0, therefore she is excluded.
Okay. Impossible to be a contributor, right?
Yes.
And then stains from sheets on bed are 4, uninformative, right?
Yes.
Not included.
Again, I can't make any inclusionary or exclusionary statements because the likelihood ratio falls into our uninformative range.
Just like her DNA found on that glove, right?
Yes.
And then from the pillowcases, that's item T1, Sade Robinson excluded.
Yes.
T2, she's uninformative, right?
Yes.
Do
The likelihood ratio is in the uninformative range.
okay. Okay. Patient excluded or informative. So go to your page 9. Duvet cover, item U1, right?
Yes.
Sade Robinson is excluded, right?
She is, yes.
And then moving down to item U2. This is going to be on page 10 is where you can see the conclusions, right?
Yes, she is excluded there as well.
Maxwell Anderson's included. That comes no surprise because this duvet cover is found in his house, right?
Well, again, I don't know how it got there. I just did the comparisons.
Okay. Stain from duvet cover U3. Sade Robinson is excluded, right?
Yes.
Item U7. Sade Robinson excluded, right?
Yes.
And then item U8. Sade Robinson, moderate support for exclusion, right?
Yes.
And that statistic is at least 1,330 times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it is a mixture resulting from H2 than if it is a mixture resulting from H1.
Yes.
And then we can see U9, uninformative again, right?
Yes.
U10 is an so U9, let me clarify, that's a stain from the duvet cover, correct?
Yes.
And uninformative.
It's Sade Robinson's likelihood ratio is in the uninformative range.
Okay, a stain from duvet cover, that is going to be U10, just below that, right?
Yes.
Sade Robinson is excluded, right?
For U10, the comparison to Sade Robinson is strong support for exclusion. So it's at least 19,000 times more likely to observe that DNA profile if it's a mixture of 3 unknown people than from Sade Robinson and 2 unknown people.
All right. Stains from duvet cover, item U11. Sade Robinson is uninformative, correct?
The comparison to her standard falls into the uninformative range for the likelihood ratio.
Stains from duvet cover, item U12. Sade Robinson is excluded.
She is.
And then we have stains from duvet cover, items U4, U5, U6, U13, and U14, right?
Yes.
And you say it's not suitable for comparison due to limited amount of DNA, right?
Yes, of the profiles had a limited amount of information, so can't be used for comparison.
All right. And then swab some bathtub faucet, that's AD1.
Yes.
It's a 3-person mixture, at least one's male, right?
Yes.
Then moving on to page 13. Maxwell Anderson, very strong support for inclusion, right?
Yes, that's where his likelihood ratio falls.
And for Sade Robinson, it says very strong support for exclusion, correct?
Yes, her likelihood ratio falls into the very strong support for exclusion.
Swab some north knob of bathtub, that's item AE1, correct?
Yes.
Consistent with profiles for Maxwell Anderson, right?
Yes.
Sade Robinson is excluded, correct?
Yes, she is.
Then swab some south knob of bathtub. Sade Robinson is very strong support for exclusion.
Yes, that's her likelihood ratio.
And then we have stain from fitted sheet, AH2. Conclusion for Sade Robinson is that she is excluded, correct?
Yes.
And then stain from fitted sheet, AA is AH5. She's also excluded, correct?
Yes, she is.
And then stain from fitted sheet, AH6. Sade Robinson is excluded, correct?
Yes.
And then stain from fitted sheet, item AH7. Sade Robinson is excluded.
Yes.
Stains from fitted sheet, AH3, AH4, and AH8. Sade Robinson is excluded, correct?
Yes.
And then we have swabs from knife blade. So that's the actual blade of the knife, right?
Yes, there were swabs taken from that.
And they didn't just swab the blade, they swabbed the blade handle, right?
Yes, the person who did the screening swabbed them separately.
And that's important because people typically hold knives with the blade. With the handle, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And it was consistent with Maxwell Anderson, right?
Yes, but the profiles on both of those were consistent with him.
But Sade Robinson was excluded.
She was.
She's excluded from the knife blade and excluded from the knife handle, correct?
Yes.
And then the hair root from the proximal bone, I think I mentioned that earlier, right?
Yes.
And Maxwell Anderson is excluded, so he's not included in that whatsoever.
That's correct.
And then hair root from proximal bone, AS2A. Sade Robinson is included, but Maxwell Anderson is excluded.
Yes, it's consistent with her profile, and Maxwell Anderson is excluded.
And then so that hair root was found on that it came to you in a lab. With the hair root came and it was found on a proximal bone, correct?
Yes, I would have to consult my notes to look at the packaging to see exactly how it came in, because again, I didn't look at that one.
Okay, but we know it's not Mr. Anderson's hair, right?
He is excluded from the DNA on that, yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to page 18. Swabs from zipper pull of sweatshirt jacket, item BF8, right?
Yes.
Sade Robinson's included, right?
Yes, the profile on that is consistent with Sade Robinson.
But you don't know how her DNA got there, right?
I do not.
It could have been direct transfer.
It could have been.
It could have been secondary transfer, right?
It could have been any number of ways to get there. I can't tell.
And you don't know when it got there.
I do not.
And it's not blood, right?
I don't believe it was tested for any body fluids. It was just swabbed.
Okay. Maxwell Anderson is excluded, correct?
Yes.
And then cutting from stain on inside left bottom of sweatshirt jacket, item BF9, says Maxwell Anderson's included, right?
Yes, there's very strong support for inclusion for Maxwell Anderson.
But Sade Robinson is very strong support for exclusion, correct?
Yes.
121 million times more likely to observe this DNA profile if it's a mixture from someone else, right?
If it's a mixture of someone who's not Sade Robinson, yes, where she's not a contributor.
Okay, and again, you didn't receive any different DNA samples from any other different males, right?
That's correct.
And moving down, cutting from stain on left side of chest pocket, BF10. It says Maxwell Anderson's included, and Sade Robinson is uninformative, correct?
Her likelihood ratio falls into the uninformative range, so no statements can be made.
All right, and then cutting from inside left cuff of sweatshirt jacket. So that's like this interior cuff, correct?
Yes.
And there's Ms. Robinson is also excluded from there, correct?
She is.
And then we have a left inside hood sweatshirt jacket, a stain from inside there. That's BF19.
Yes.
And then both Mr. Anderson and Ms. Robinson are both very strong support for inclusion, correct?
Each of their likelihood ratios, yes, fall into the very strong support for inclusion.
Okay, and again, we don't know how Ms. Robinson's DNA would have gotten there, right?
I don't know how the DNA got there, no.
And you don't know when it got there, correct?
That's correct.
And so that finding someone's DNA or this likelihood ratio, is that consistent with someone just possibly wearing someone else's hoodie?
DNA can be transferred that way. Again, I don't know because all I know is what the DNA shows.
So if you know, say my partner wears my hoodie or something, it's possible that her DNA could be found on my hoodie because she put it on, right?
I'm going to object for speculation, and we've already covered this.
I believe we have gone down this path already. I'll sustain the objection. Next question, please.
And just briefly here, all the knives that you tested, Ms. Robinson's blood was not, her blood was not found on any of those, correct?
There was only one knife that was tested. And no, there was no blood detected on it, and she is excluded from it.
Okay, and everything that was tested was sent to you by probably law enforcement, correct?
I believe so.
And law enforcement has the ability to send you any items that they deem relevant for an investigation, right?
Not always. We have guidelines on what can be submitted and what cannot be submitted. And so we don't take everything that law enforcement wants to give us necessarily. It depends.
Okay, but if law enforcement sent you an item to test and they thought it was very important for their investigation, you would test it unless it was one of these items that you just can't test.
Yes, if someone wants to submit an item and it wouldn't fall within our guidelines, but they called about it, we would certainly have a discussion with them.
Okay, and there's multiple lab analysts who work at the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, right?
Yes.
So because you can only test so many items, right? You only have so much time.
Well, yes, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at, I
Well,
guess.
there's multiple other analysts that can test items. If the police send you a large variety of items, you're not the only one who needs to do the testing, right?
No, typically, it'll only be a few people, but it depends on the case and the size of the case. In this case, there were so many items. There was another analyst who was helping me out with screening and some extractions as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything else.
State.
So there was male DNA on the swab from the driver's door handle?
There was a limited amount, so it would have been a very, very small amount.
So you couldn't do further testing, but there was male DNA there?
If you would let me look at my
Sure.
quantitation, thank you. The amount of male DNA on that item falls below our thresholds for both the autosomal testing that was done and for YSDR testing. So there is nothing that could have been done with it.
So beyond learning that there was male DNA there was nothing else you could do with that?
That's correct.
You couldn't compare it to Maxwell Anderson's?
That's correct. The only profile I had was the female profile.
And when we're, for example, Exhibit 440, I think I need the control back. All right, 440 here, the single source, I think it's over there too. Right here, this single source female profile from the zipper pull of that gray sweatshirt is consistent with the profile from Sade Robinson. And Maxwell Anderson, he's excluded, well, but it's a female profile, right?
Yes.
So that's not surprising, right?
Right, and he is excluded.
Okay. Nothing else.
Defense?
No.